We're gonna talk some tea today, guys. Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Ian, I am Ian the Reader, and today I have another video for you. Today I'm gonna be talking to you guys about authors that I have love-hate relationships with. Now, what do I mean by that? By love-hate, I mean authors that I have read multiple books by, some that I have absolutely loved, and some that I have hated. I'm just kidding. I don't necessarily hate the books that I'm talking about in this video. However, there's definitely a difference in quality that I have noticed between one author's works and another, and that's why they're being featured in this video. That being said, there are a few works, I say works, I guess they're works, in this video that I will be discussing that I'm going to try to not get too heated about because I really don't like them at all. Before we get into the rest of the video though, let's go ahead and talk brewed tea rather than the tea that we're gonna get into. So today I am drinking a raspberry herbal tea from Harney & Sons because I love Harney & Sons. They make amazing tea. It's decaffeinated, it's super nice, very fruity and flavorful, and I just love it. It's great. Also, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Please stick around because I'm having a good time and I like talking books with you, and you should totally talk books with me in the comments. You can also hit that notification bell if you want to, but that's totally up to you. But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video. So at number 10, and I say number 10, I'm kind of like going in order of like least hated book to like most hated book. So, and this is very loose because these, you know, emotions can change from day to day. But anyway, number 10, we have Matt Haig, who is an author that I discovered back in 2020. It's funny that I feel like everybody discovered him in 2020 because he wrote The Midnight Library, which is a wildly popular book that came out at the end of 2020, and it's just been everywhere. I feel like everybody's been talking about The Midnight Library, and I enjoyed The Midnight Library. That's not my hated book here, but his book, The Humans, is my absolute favorite Matt Haig book so far. I think I've read 5 of his books, and that one is just spectacular. The humor in it, the emotion in it, the science fiction angle of it is so fun. It's just a very creative book. And so that is my love side of Matt Haig. However, I'm not really a big fan of some of his other works, specifically How to Stop Time. This book, I think, was his most popular work before he wrote The Midnight Library, and it's one that, again, like, I didn't hate it, I just really didn't enjoy it, and it wasn't memorable for me. So this story essentially follows a man who lives forever, and there are a lot of other people in the world that live forever, apparently, but they're part of the secret society that essentially, to be allowed to continue living on forever, you have to relocate, basically, like, I think every 7 years, maybe it's more than that, but essentially you're allowed to live in an area, but you can't have, like, really deep roots in it, and every 7 years or so, you have to relocate and start a brand new life, so that people don't catch on to the fact that you're living forever. But of course, issues ensue when people get attached, and yada yada yada, it goes from there. The problem with this book, like I said, is it was just very forgettable. It has a plot and an idea that I thought was very interesting, although not necessarily original by any means. But the execution just kind of fell flat for me. It's one that let me down because I had already seen what Matt Haig was capable of in his other works, and I was very impressed by him. And so for him to really fall flat for me in this area, it was just a letdown, and so it definitely made me have mixed emotions about picking up another book by him. That being said, he has proven himself to be worthy of my time and attention time and time again ever since then. So, still recommend Matt Haig, even though I don't love all of his books. Coming in at number 9, we have an author who is kind of similar to Matt Haig in that same way, and that is Matthew Quick. Matthew Quick is an author who is most popular for probably his novel Silver Linings Playbook because it got an adaptation with Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence. It got a lot of awards, and the adaptation is great, although not very faithful. But he also wrote Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock, which is a very popular YA novel that I love. And those two are probably my favorites by him, although I have read all of his works, and I think he has maybe 8 published novels. He was writing one a year for a while, but he's been on hiatus for the past 5 or so years, and his new book does come out in November, so I'm very excited about that. That being said, his most recent published work, The Reason You're Alive, was a book that I just really didn't enjoy at all. It centers on a man who was a veteran, and he is dealing with some health issues that have come up suddenly, but in addition to that, he's also struggling with his family because he has very strained relationships with his son, because he has very strong opinions that his son doesn't necessarily agree with, and they don't always get along. And this was one that kind of felt weighed down by the things that Matthew Quick was trying to say, and it felt like the story got lost in it. Another thing with Matthew Quick is I'm not always a fan of his endings, and this is one that just felt very lackluster in its final execution. the book as a whole just really didn't do anything for me. And so again, like, this is another one of those authors that I really, really love, but I know that he can do better than what he's done recently. So here's hoping his newest book that comes out in November is amazing. Coming in at number 8, we have Gillian Flynn, who is an amazing writer who can write fantastic mystery thrillers with such deep and suspenseful and eerie writing as displayed in her works Gone Girl and Sharp Objects, but not in Dark Places, because I did not like that book very much at all. I read Gone Girl when I was in high school and quickly followed it up with her debut novel Sharp Objects, and I loved both of them so much. And then I read Dark Matter, and it just felt like a mess, like, to be honest. It was one of those mystery thrillers that was very much focused on kind of the twisted aspects of it, to the point that it very much sacrificed the plot structure for me, and it sacrificed the characters as well. It was one that I thought was disturbing sometimes, but really just didn't do anything for me, if that makes sense. I really loved her other 2 books, and I will definitely read anything else she puts out, if she ever puts out another novel, because Gone Girl came out in like 2012, I think. But Dark Places just wasn't it for me at all. All right, number 7, we have another mystery thriller author, that being Riley Sager. So I have read 3 Riley Sager books, and only one of them I enjoyed, to be quite frank. That book being Home Before Dark. That book was really fun. I had a blast reading it with my wife. It is like kind of a ghost story haunted house kind of situation, but also like a mystery thriller, murder mystery kind of thing. And I thought the execution on that one was really great. I thought the characters were memorable. The setting was really well done. And the mystery itself was very twisty in a way that I just could not predict what was going to happen. And I thought the ambiance in that book was really well done as well. Very like Haunting of Hill House. If that's something that you enjoy, then it's very, very reminiscent of that, but in a really good way. I thought it did a good job with it. That being said, I have not enjoyed the other 2 works that I've read by Sager, those being Lock Every Door and Final Girls. Final Girls in particular was one that just like was so boring, to be honest. Like, after I read it, I felt okay about it, but the longer that it sat with me, the less I enjoyed it, because it was one of those that just failed to do anything original for the most part. Like, I think it kind of tries to play on like horror tropes and things like that, but in like the least interesting way possible. Final Girls was like terribly predictable, and on the opposite end, Lock Every Door was like unpredictable, but in a way that was just like really outlandish. Because like with plots, you know, like with plot twists, I mean, I like them to be not necessarily like easy to predict, but to be reasonable enough that at the end when it's revealed, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes sense, and it blows your mind. Not like totally out of left field, doesn't make sense, what the heck. And that's what Lock Every Door was, and Final Girls just like was boring. But anyway, that's Riley Sager. Maybe I'll read another one of his books at some point, but I really don't have any interest in it. For me to pick up another one of his books, it has to get like ridiculously amazing reviews. And even then, maybe not. Coming in at number 6, I think. Maybe we're at number 6. I think we're at number 6. If not, I apologize. Is the Queen, Sarah J. Maas. I just don't feel good about this author anymore, and it sucks because, to be honest with you, I used to love Sarah J. Maas's works and her books and her writing. I thought they were so much fun. The first like 4 books in the Throne of Glass series I was absolutely obsessed with, particularly Queen of Shadows. I've actually reread that one, and it really held up. It was still a 5-star book for me when I read it back in, I think, 2019. But the rest of the series just... Okay, here's my issue. So, Throne of Glass started out as a YA series with a relatively generic premise, I guess, but it was well executed. The characters were really interesting, and the way the plot evolved throughout the books was very interesting for me. The problem is, halfway through writing that series, she started writing the Of Court of Thorns and Roses series, which leaned more into like the new adult kind of genre, get a little bit more spicy, as it were, and that was very successful. And so she brought that aspect of her storytelling to Throne of Glass, and it was kind of jarring, to be honest, because the first 3 or 4 books have some of that kind of content, but it's handled completely differently than the rest of the series. And so it's one of those things where the tone and the writing style shifted so dramatically that I, as the reader, was left like kind of thrown off. And it's one of those things where, like, this is just personal preference, because I know that all of her books are quite beloved on Instagram and Goodreads and kind of all over the place, but for me, that's just not my style. And so I've read quite a few of her books since that 4th book in the Throne of Glass series. I did finish the Throne of Glass series and felt about the rest of the books. I've also read the first 3 books in A Court of Thorns and Roses and the first book in the Crescent City series, and they all were just not for me. I made a joke with my aunt who I was buddy reading this with. It was like a formula to create a Sarah J. Maas character. Take the original one, change the hairstyle, change the artistic thing they're interested in. One is interested in reading, one is interested in painting, one is interested in dancing, and amplify the curves and the smugness and the ridiculousness, and you've got yourself a brand new Sarah J. Maas protagonist. Oh, also they have to like purr a lot and smirk a lot and things like that, and it's ridiculous. Like, to be honest, it is. There's so many Sarah J. Maas isms that irk me that I just don't see myself ever picking up another one of her books. We'll see. We'll see. I know I'm in the minority here. If you enjoy her books, that is awesome, and I'm so happy for you, but they're not for me. All right, coming in at number 5, we have one that might be a little bit shocking. If you've been watching my videos, this is an author that you wouldn't think that I would necessarily have read any books by, but that author is Stephenie Meyer, the author of Twilight. So I read back in like maybe 2015 The Host by Stephenie Meyer, and I absolutely loved it at that time. This is one of those books that I feel like every reader has if they've been reading for any length of time, where when they were younger, they read a book and loved it, but they're kind of scared to reread it as an adult because they're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Will I actually enjoy that book now? And that's definitely one of those for me, because at the time, I thought it was so interesting, so well executed, but I don't know if The Host would hold up in my mind. I also did read Twilight when I was in middle school, the first book, and I thought it was okay. I didn't continue with the series, but I picked it up again in I think 2019 or 2020, and I absolutely hated it. Mainly because it was just boring to me. Like, that's the thing with Twilight. It's not necessarily bad all the time. I mean, yeah, it's kind of cringy at times. But Bella is just such a boring character, you know? Like, she spends most of the book just kind of moping and sitting around and being bored and missing Edward, and it's just like a whole thing. And to read a 450 or maybe even 500-page book about primarily that was just not a good time. I ended up skimming a lot of it just because it was not enjoyable. And so this is definitely an author that I don't necessarily feel drawn to anymore. I may one day pick up another Stephenie Meyer book if she writes something new, or I may even reread The Host at some point, but I don't know, very middle of the road for me. All right, number 4 and number 3 are authors that I absolutely love. So we're gonna go ahead and kind of talk about them together. Those are Stephen King and Robin Hobb. I feel like I never shut up about both of these authors because I love and respect them so much. But they're not perfect. You know, nobody's perfect. And so let's talk about Stephen King first. With Stephen King, I love so many of his books. My favorite 3 are probably It, 11/22/63, and Misery. But he still has some books that have just let me down, especially having read like 25 to 30 of his books. There are some of his books that just didn't do it for me, specifically Elevation, which is one of his newer publications. It came out in maybe like 2017. Can't remember specifically. Gosh, 2017 isn't like super recent though. That's like 5 years ago. Super weird. But yeah, Elevation was one that I read really quickly because it's only like this big, but it sucked. Like, to be honest, it sucked for a number of reasons. One, he had a very specific political message that he was trying to communicate, which is totally fine, and I think that that is great when authors handle it well, but he just was so heavy-handed with it. It was almost like a brochure on his opinions that he kind of threw some plot in there with. But then in addition to that, this is one of the first books that I read by Stephen King where it became very obvious to me that Stephen King is getting older, because when he wrote some dialogue from some teenage characters, he used some certain phrases and things like that that just do not make sense coming from a 21st century teen. And so the two things combined, and the fact that the plot just kind of didn't go anywhere for me, it was really a bummer. I did not enjoy it at all. I gave it 2 stars at the time, but honestly, 1.5 maybe. And then we have Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is an author who I've only read the Realm of the Elderlings books for, and I still haven't finished Assassin's Fate, so don't spoil me. But I love, like, almost all of her books in that series, except for the Rainwild Chronicles, which is nothing new. Like, if you have watched any reviews of the series or you are familiar with these books at all, you'll know that the Rainwild Chronicles is pretty divisive amongst the Robin Hobb fandom. And that's because it's just too much. Like, I love Robin Hobb in the way that she can be very long-winded, but in a way that's justified. She writes characters so well. She has very slow-burning plots that really build up in tension to the ultimate finale and things like that. And her descriptions are fantastic as well. Her writing is just absolutely beautiful. That being said, in the Rainwild Chronicles, Robin Hobb lost her mind a little bit. Or she just didn't control herself at all. The thing with the Rainwild Chronicles is that there's a good idea in there. There's a good, like, heart of the plot that is just drawn out way too long. Because there are 4 books in the Rainwild Chronicles, and honestly, If Rob and Hobb had taken the good parts of all 4 of those books and condensed them into one volume, it would be really, really good, but there's so much extra junk that is unnecessary. It is boring. There are character relationships and dynamics that are just absolutely ridiculous. It honestly sometimes feels like The Bachelorette, but in the Rain Wilds, which is just not fun to read, to be honest. And it just wasn't really memorable. I honestly feel like you could practically skip it and just pick up on like a few different plot points. Somebody could loop you in on those and you'd be better off skipping the Rainbow Chronicles. That's just me. Some people love those books, but I am not one of them. And it sucks because the rest of the Realm of the Elderling books are so good. Ugh. What are you gonna do? Alrighty guys, we're in the top 2 and I'm going to try to hold back my hatred because the books that I hate by these last 2 authors are books that I really don't like. Let's jump into it. All right, coming in at number 2, we have Alex Michaelits, who is a mystery thriller author who has become quite popular over the past few years. He wrote the novel The Silent Patient, which I read back in 2019 and loved. I thought that it was so well executed. I thought that the writing was really dark and really atmospheric, and I thought the plots were really out there, but in ways that were like so mind-blowing in their execution. I thought it was really well done. It's one of those books that has stuck with me a lot since I read it and has really just like continued to grow positively in my mind. So then, last year, when I was offered a digital Arc of the Maidens, I was so excited to dive in. And wow, an author has not fallen from grace so quickly for me ever, because The Maidens was such a mess. Like, it really was. It was one of those books where it felt to me like Alex Michaelits was trying to live up to the expectation that was set for him from his first book. And so he came up with this crazy plot, or this crazy like plot twist, just like he had in The Silent Patient. But it's like almost like he started out with that twist, but he had no idea how to get there. And so the story starts with a really boring character and some really ridiculous red herrings that are so blatantly trying to force upon you that this is the killer, that you know that it's not the killer. And then you get to the twist and it's just like, what? That doesn't even make sense. It's just a mess. Ugh, it's a mess. And it was also kind of boring too, and there were certain aspects, like he really tried to advertise it as this dark academia kind of thing, but that really is just kind of like a plot tool that he uses to draw attention to the book and wasn't really important to the actual plot itself, in my opinion. And so it's a book that frustrates me to think about because I've seen what he can do in his first book, and it just feels like he was trying way too hard in some ways while also not trying hard enough with this book, if that makes sense. I don't know. I really didn't like The Maidens at all. If you liked it, I'm happy for you. I'm glad that you found enjoyment where I could not, but The Maidens is not for me, and I will be very hesitant when picking up Alex Michaelits' next book. And now, we are at the number 1 spot. Who could it be, you might be wondering? Well, I'm here to tell you, it is Suzanne Collins. Oh my gosh. I think part of this is that I was so excited for the prequel to The Hunger Games to come out when it did in 2020. It was a rough time, things were crazy, COVID was going on, and A Light in the Darkness was the prequel to The Hunger Games from the perspective of President Snow, the villain. That just sounds awesome, right? Right? Oh, but it sucked, you guys. It was a book that just ruined everything for me because I loved the original Hunger Games trilogy. Even Mockingjay, even though it was controversial and, you know, people didn't love it, I did. I loved it. I loved the whole trilogy. I thought it was amazing. And then Suzanne Collins wrote this prequel that could have been good, but because of the execution felt unnecessary and unfortunate. And my little brother said this to me, and I feel like it makes perfect sense. It's like she had this list of like everything that happened in the Hunger Games, like all the different things that were introduced, all the unique qualities of the world, and it's like she had the list next to her and she had to explain all of their backstories, and she just went through and was like, okay, check, check, check. And it felt ridiculous. Everything that came up from the previous books that were written, or like the future books, and chronologically, you know what I mean, just felt so unnatural and so forced. And then on top of that, like, this is an early Hunger Games thing, and the really exciting and like thrilling aspect of that book is that you're in the Hunger Games, you're in the arena with the tributes, and you get to experience that. But with this one, you're from President Snow's perspective, and so he's on the outside because he is like one of the mentors or whatever, and they don't have like the cameras and stuff like that, so you can't even see half the crap that's going on in there. So it's just like him sitting there waiting to see like little peeks of his little tribute that he's helped coach, and it was just ridiculous. Like, oh man, it was such a letdown. It was such a bummer. It could have been really good, but it felt cheap. It felt plastic. It felt unnecessary. And it's a 1 star for me. I don't give 1 stars like ever. Really, like ever. I can usually find something redeeming in a book, but for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, I hated it so much. Okay, it's all gone. I'm letting go of all that hatred, all of that aggression, all of that frustration. It's gone. It's gone. I never have to think about those books again. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed, even if I had some opinions that differ from your own. That's totally fine, because that's what books and art and media are all about, is how we interpret them and how we perceive them and things like that, and I think that's wonderful. Let me know down below if there are any of my opinions that you agree with or that you disagree with. I would love to talk about these with you guys, but those are the 10 authors that I love and I hate. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And I would love to talk books with you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!